Welcome to the Podkey summary of Build, Deliver, and Automate with Xcode Cloud from WWDC 2026. A lot of this week's Xcode Cloud story comes down to trust and convenience. Apple's pitching a setup where your code stays private, your builds fan out across devices fast, and even multi-app projects or modular repos don't turn into a bunch of repetitive setup work. It's all very geared toward the real-world mess of modern app teams, where you've got shared frameworks, different platforms, testers waiting on builds, and nobody wants to click through the same authorization screen twice. One of the more interesting details here is how Xcode Cloud handles source code during builds. The builds run on temporary virtual machines. The source gets fetched at the start, and then that machine is discarded afterward. So the code isn't being persisted on Apple's servers, which gets right at one of the big anxieties people have with Cloud CI in the first place. If you're a company with proprietary code, that matters a lot, because the whole point is Apple technically can't just go inspect and hang on to your source. That doesn't make security concerns disappear forever, because nothing in software ever disappears forever, but it does answer a very specific and very common worry in a pretty clean way. The other practical piece is webhooks. Xcode Cloud can send build event payloads to any publicly reachable URL, which is a simple feature with a lot of mileage. That means teams can pipe build updates into dashboards, chat tools, internal services, or whatever homegrown status board somebody made 3 years ago and now everybody depends on. And it works across every build stage, including creation, start, and completion. So you can get pretty precise about automation, like nudging testers when a build is ready, updating a board when a run kicks off, or tracking completion without somebody manually checking in all day. There's also a nice bit of polish around multi-app workflows inside a single Xcode workspace. If you've got, say, an iOS app and a macOS app living in the same repo, you can onboard both and create separate workflows for each target. You don't need some elaborate extra configuration to make that happen. Once the first app is connected, the second workflow can be added right from the report navigator with the Create Workflow button. And because the repository is already authorized, you skip that whole reconnecting step. It's just a few clicks, which sounds small until you remember how much developer tooling still manages to make the second app feel like a brand new administrative event. The distribution side sounds similarly streamlined. Xcode Cloud can automatically create the App Store Connect record, validate the bundle ID and SKU, and spin up a dedicated workflow for internal TestFlight distribution. That saves a bunch of context switching, especially for smaller teams where the same person is building, configuring, testing, and probably also answering Slack messages about all of it. There's a nice little usability detail too. If the app name you picked is already taken, the conflict gets flagged immediately in the onboarding flow. So you can rename it right there, instead of bouncing out to another screen and losing your place, which is not glamorous, but it is the kind of thing that makes setup feel sane. For teams splitting shared code into separate repositories, Xcode Cloud seems to handle that pretty sensibly too. If a shared framework moves into its own Git repo, you can point Xcode Cloud to that new remote URL from the Manage Repository screen. The important part is that existing authorizations are preserved. So you're not rebuilding the connection model from scratch every time the architecture gets a little more modular. That keeps each build pulling the right version of a shared style framework or dependency, while preserving consistency across all the app targets that depend on it. It's one of those under-the-hood workflow details that matters more as a codebase grows up. And then there's the speed story, which is really about parallel testing. Xcode Cloud can run builds and tests simultaneously on multiple virtual devices across different iOS versions, instead of making you crawl through that process one device at a time locally. That shortens the feedback loop in a very direct way. You find compatibility problems earlier, and that gets especially important when a team is moving fast, adding more agents, and pushing features that can break in slightly different ways depending on OS version. Serial local testing has a way of making every bug feel personal. Parallel cloud testing is a lot better at turning it back into information. Taken together, The pattern here is pretty clear. Apple's trying to make Cloud CI feel less like a separate system you have to accommodate, and more like a natural extension of the Xcode workflow teams already have. Private ephemeral build machines address trust. Webhooks open the door to custom automation, and the multi-app and multi-repo pieces cut down on repetitive setup. Then parallel testing and TestFlight distribution handle the part everybody actually feels day to day, which is how quickly you can build, verify, and get software in front of people. So if you've been watching Xcode Cloud and wondering whether it's built for real teams or just clean demo projects, these details push it a lot closer to the real world. And honestly, any developer tool that saves time without asking for your source code as a souvenir is off to a pretty good start. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.
Podkey.